Welcome everyone to the 13th episode, regular episode of Signs, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms. This is an astrological update with myself as host, Erik Roth. I'm here to share with you primarily what's coming up in the month of December. So we're already in the beginning stages of December, and there is a lot to talk about here. So we're in the middle of the time of this recording. We're in the middle of another major surge in this COVID-19 pandemic. And that is something I'm actually going to talk about with reference in the Saturn-Jupiter Pluto configuration that's been the primary theme in 2020. So let's first do an acknowledgement, an invocation. Okay, just to share this time of great creation, we're at the time of crossroads, and honoring our ancestors, all of our relations, all the elements and the planets, the sun and the moon, and the directions. I thank the cosmos for the wisdom, the love, the breath of this creation that we're all a part of. And we just take a moment to breathe, to feel into who we are, our authentic expression, and how we can contribute to our future and to the community, to the world at large, and whatever role that we're here to play. And we want to honor that process. Thank you. For December, major highlights. This is a big month coming up here. Both Saturn and Jupiter ingress into the sign of Aquarius, meaning they move into that sign. For Jupiter, it's the first time it briefly moved into Aquarius this year for a couple of months, but it'll be the first time it moves in full time into the sign of Aquarius, and since the early 1990s. Then we have Jupiter for the first time in 12 years moving into the sign of Aquarius, and of course two other major things here: total solar eclipse on December 14th, and then a week later on the 21st we have on this December solstice with a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, a very, very rare situation that where they coincide with each other. Another Pluto-Eris square, the third of 5 times. Chiron stations direct this month. Also, Venus moves into Sagittarius this month. I'm not going to be talking about it too much. It's more in the latter part of this month, and so it could be part of another video that I go into. Mars has its third and final conjunction with Eris this year, and then its third and final square with Pluto this year, happening towards the end of December. All right, the big topic, and a lot of astrologers are talking about this, so of course, it's time to put in my 2 cents here for the Saturn and Jupiter and Aquarius. Really, it truly is a big deal, especially because it's happening around the same time as and on the same day as the solstice, but they're moving into the same sign together, roughly around the same, within days of each other. So this is taking place, this conjunction, at 0 degrees 28 or 29 minutes, depending on what kind of observation one makes, or the computers one using for this conjunction here. So we can see that the power of the solstice is the annual standstill of the sun at its most southerly point. And here in the northern hemisphere is when we have the shortest day of the year. In the southern hemisphere, it's where they have the longest day of the year. So we're seeing the two visible gas giants out there at the bridge into the outer part of the solar system coming together, and they're going to be really, really close in the night sky. So if you have opportunities to go and see it, and if you have to travel a little bit to see it, it's definitely worth seeing. But it's not like if you miss the one day and it's cloudy that you're going to miss the whole event. They're going to be close together for approximately a 2-week period, really close together. And of course, the closer you get to the 21st, say the 20th or the 22nd, the 23rd, the 19th, those days you're also going to be extremely close, these two planets. So as a night sky situation, one of the very rare situations where they're going to get almost merge, their lights will almost merge together, forming one light. Okay, so this 2020 conjunction is the nearest to the solstice since 1603. So we have 4 centuries of time that have passed. That time it took place in the sign of Sagittarius, when and only about 18 degrees away from the sun. This takes place about 30 degrees away from the sun, so it's definitely more visible. So that happened only about 4 days before the actual solstice on December 17th, 1603. So it'll be the closest conjunction since then, and it will be another 140 years before it happens as close. And at that time, 2159, it won't be as close as this time. That next one, 2159, will take place about 8 degrees Scorpio, so only one day before the solstice. So last time they were conjunct, these two planets were conjunct in the sign of Aquarius. It happened 4 times in the Middle Ages here, 1405, 1345, 1285, and 1226. When the rotation of the Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions, they go through certain rotations or cycles where they're conjuncting in specific elements. Like we're just entering the element of air as far as these Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions are concerned. In the early 80s, that happened, 1980, 81, that happened in the sign of Libra. In 2000, it was back into Earth again in Taurus. But then now again, it's going to do Aquarius, and so it's going to be primarily air signs for several decades to come. So just so you know that these conjunctions, again, they're rare. They happen every 20 years. Saturn and Jupiter get together every 20 years. So it's a really significant. The last time this happened was in Taurus. It was just during the last, it was a major election. And we also had some controversy around that, around the state of Florida, George Bush and Al Gore here in the United States, where the Supreme Court ruled that they had to stop the recount, and then George Bush ended up winning that election by that decision of the Supreme Court. So this year we had all kinds of other types of controversies that were, contested from the current president, Donald Trump, over Joe Biden's victory, even though there was no evidence to support any issues around the actual voting process. And it was interesting to how clean that election was and how smooth it went. And many states were reporting that in that vicinity. So it's just fascinating to see that result come through, and where but things are not necessarily over. So everything is just like, oh, it's all good, everything's fine. No, we've got a lot of crises taking place right now, other than the political mess that was the presidency of Donald Trump. All right. So what does this Saturn-Jupiter conjunction Aquarius mean? Well, let's look at this. We still have a lot to awaken to. We're still in this major crossroads. It's a multi-year process. 2020 isn't the only year. We've been kind of going through this over the last few decades, but there was certainly some major challenges coming through in the 2010s. As Pluto moved into, well, really 2008, when Pluto moved into Capricorn and started squaring Uranus for several years off and on. And that created some disruptions, some challenges, some changes, some breakthroughs. So now we're at this place here in this crisis. Now we've got this pandemic and the political, educational, health, economic crisis that is all ongoing. So going into Aquarius is a sign that has to do with innovation, it's the sign of kind of the wizard, or the eccentric entrepreneur, or the magician, or the one that can see beyond itself, see from a cosmic perspective, and expanded consciousness, a leading edge, a leading thinker, kind of an energy, avant-garde, if you will. So Saturn, moving into that with Jupiter, is that's actually really fairly balanced between the two planets. It can create a more balanced approach to how we connect with Aquarian energy. And Aquarian does have some connections to humanitarianism, to innovation, to consciousness expansion, to um, technological advancement, but also consciousness, or spiritual advancement, maybe perhaps a more situation where it gets into more like, hey, we can see through this dark time into the light. We can see beyond where we are, that it doesn't have to be, as some have, been looking at as kind of this dystopian type of image, where, maybe, technology runs amok, where there is a police state kind of a thing. I don't necessarily see that happening. I see something really more unknown awakening coming together and opening up for all of us. But it's in on what we choose. And I also see that there is going to be a greater effort, collectively speaking, around the Earth Mother, around connecting to the environmental crisis that we're all in, and that no one will be immune to. That eventually all will be under the toe of a powerfully changing climate here that we're all experiencing. So Saturn is an agent for growth through limits and boundaries, and shedding our collective skin with the planting of the seeds of the long-term future, whereas Jupiter will be expanding, provide us with a vision quest path through that sign, with synchronicities taking place. Um, it also signals a change. Uh, Uranus currently is in Taurus, and this is of a completely another video altogether, uh, of a Saturn-Uranus theme next year, with Jupiter kind of involved in that, because it'll be in the sign of Aquarius. But Saturn stays in Aquarius for the most part until 2023, and until it reaches that end of that period. And with the exception of a short time that year, when it was Jupiter, Jupiter also stays in Aquarius and through 2021, with the exception of a short time in May, June, and July, when it briefly goes into the sign of Pisces, which again is another topic altogether. And I'll be covering that in a video that I'm going to do just specifically about 2021. But this will how this time, this conjunction that happens on the solstice, this is really about a rebirthing, about a reaching the point, we might say our darkest moment, and our connection, especially to the COVID-19 crisis. There has been a lot of, I'm seeing in looking back at the previous alignments of Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto, and especially with Mars, and how that has been activating for us the intensity of the crisis of COVID-19, and how in this last wave here, both that February to early April period of 2020 compared to this late October into through, I would say, mid to late December here, where there was the greater concentration of these planets together, where they weren't retrograde, because they did come together really, really closely also in the late spring and early summer, but they were retrograde during that time. So it's just a little bit different kind of experience here. They're direct right now, because we're getting that awakening to a greater emphasis of expanding our horizons a bit, and maybe having some breakthroughs and some innovations, perhaps even being able to see a wider picture instead of the narrow field of, well, we don't have a future, but we do. And that's one of the sort of the emphasis, I think, that the seeds that are being planted in Capricorn are going to help grow in the long term. And here's where I want to bring up also in December here, is that Mars and Mars, Pluto, and Eris. They are going to be getting together strongly this month. In January, Mars has um, squares with Saturn and Jupiter, but this month, December 22nd and 23rd, are particularly curious about the conjunction with Eris, Mars and Eris, and then the square with Pluto on December 23rd. This is just a part of the theme and part of the intensity, and why I see that after that solstice period, which is in the days just after following it, there will be a greater release of this. There's already starting to be a release, but I think after we get through these next few weeks, that things will start to open up a little bit more when we get beyond that. So we'll see how this follows. I've got another few slides about the Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto orb, but I wanted to just to make sure that we understand the emphasis of this Saturn Jupiter conjunction and how important it is. And they're having it about 6 degrees away, roughly 6 degrees away from Pluto. So there's kind of an opening up of the experience of Aquarius and what we need to do constructively to work with it in harmony with Earth, but also to expand our horizons, to go beyond where we are, to be able to see as an eagle sees instead of through the forest, and being able to see the whole landscape itself, and kind of taking the torch forward a little bit there. All right, as I talked about Mars and Eris, I also want to talk about Pluto and Eris and how on December 10th, they're having the third of 5 exact squares. And this is, there's 2 more in 2021. So we're not completely what we call out of the woods with all of these alignments. There's still a lot of things that we're trying to clean up, that we will need to clean up, that we need to face, that the shadow of all the intensity and the crises that have taken place, there's still going to be healing to do, still going to be crises to face, but it's definitely going to be a different tone in 2021. But December is this last stage here of 2020 where, things that we need to face, and having the stamina and the courage to keep going, to step into it, and that that we will find a time where we can breathe more fully in 2021. But this is just a time where we're going to need to to strengthen our resolve and to focus, because we don't want this. We can prevent a lot of deaths. We can choose life, and hopefully open up to a greater future for ourselves. Eris is a factor around. It has some parts that are a little bit underworld, but it's more about the energetic swirl that the feminine, if you will, the strong sovereign feminine comes in with, that is different in contrast with, quote, the masculine archetype and the patriarchy. So we're getting this, perhaps some energy around how the feminine can show up more strongly and create, maybe even some breakthroughs or some push against what the patriarchy has been involved in for several thousand years. That this energy in 2021 is going to carry through. And I believe I've already, really we're seeing signs of that, the decay of the patriarchy. We're seeing signs of that kind of collapsing, but it's a long process. It isn't just an overnight sensation, but these last several years, and really, if we want to look back over the last couple of centuries, even, we've seen the degrading of the patriarchal hold and the sort of the last gasp efforts of the patriarchy and the sort of the macho, masculinism and alpha maleism that has been permeated throughout this planet. That it's just one version of the masculine, and shouldn't be the, quote, the most dominant version, and that everything has its own voice. And so that's obviously a topic for later, but that is something to connect with for all of us, and finding the masculine within ourselves. And those that have, for example, uh, Aries energy, and I've talked about this before, of Mars going through Aries and Eris in that zone. This is being activated very strongly and for you. All right, there's a full moon, a lunar eclipse, or there was just recently here on November 30th. This is just a refresh that we're in the eclipse season, and there's another one coming up. This one happened in the moon near Aldebaran in the sign of Gemini, the Bull constellation. So I certainly felt a certain um, intensity with this particular eclipse, kind of a drain. It felt very draining to me. I've gotten reports from others that there's just kind of this wild energy and other kinds of intensity that's happening for them. So I didn't get a chance to see it because it was foggy, it was overcast. So for those of you that had, I'm hopeful that some were able to see it out there. But upcoming, of course, is on December 14th, is our um, is our new moon solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse that takes place in the southern part of South America. And it crosses over the part of the Pacific Ocean that borders South America and into South America, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, and then out into the Atlantic Ocean. This one takes place near the galactic center, so very much obviously opposite where the other one took place. And this is the connection to the Golden Gate. This is the connection to where souls go to be reborn from Earth. And it's a really powerful emphasis. Obviously, there's a black hole right in that space. So, but people throughout the globe viewed it as a really powerful spot for souls to go and be reborn in various kinds of mythologies, depending on where you were in the globe. But they were tuned into it. They knew about it from a philosophical, from a metaphysical, from a spiritual level, not so much from an, might say a astronomical, scientific perspective, but they knew of it. They connected to it very readily. This takes place again at around 23 degrees Sagittarius. And for those that have personal planets or points in that zone of the latter degrees of Sagittarius and Gemini, this is definitely something that is going to be impacting your own life. And I recommend fully embracing that, connecting to it with ceremony, meditation. It's a portal into the future, into the cosmic or celestial temple. And Sagittarius is about truth and meaning and embracing the philosophical pursuits of finding meaning and truth and not be bound by, you know, lies or by the fakeness or the unreality, but about the essence of who we are and what is that essence and tapping into it and accepting and connecting with reality for what it is, and the truth and meaning of that, rather than simply just ignoring it and manufacturing our own just to appease our own quote ego or our own world, but really tapping into for what it is and opening up the soul to that special relationship to the cosmos. You're seeing the celestial picture here that I got from the software program Stellarium, and you can see the Scorpion, the Archer, upside down, and Ophiuchus. That's because this takes place in the southern hemisphere. So when you're looking at the program, it's opposite. So they're on the bottom side, quote the bottom side of the earth, depending on one's perspective. And maybe the people that originated there didn't look at it necessarily in that fashion, but from a northern hemisphere perspective, that's what it looks kind of like, a little bit upside down there. So, but I encourage all of you to tap into that for yourselves and to connect and find out your own truth, your own meaning, and what that means to your own reality and in resonance with the reality that's around you, and not to ignore that particular reality, but to face up to that inner truth. Okay, so another thing that's happening is Chiron. Chiron is stationing direct this month on December 15th. So Chiron symbolizes the fracture, the wound point. And there's certain things that are common to the Chiron fracture, the wound. It's the centaur shaman healer. So these ones I've got listed right in here: betrayal, abandonment, isolation, lack of self-love, guilt and shame, victimization, perfection, the inner critic. These are things from a shamanic astrology perspective. Certainly, I've got a quote here from Daniel Giammaro's book, Shamanic Astrology Handbook, that talks about this and how Chiron can be of help to us by having aware of our own process of healing and medicine. And certainly from a collective perspective, Chiron is in the sign of Aries. So being in the sign of Aries, it first entered that sign in 2018 and will continue to be there for another 6+ years. The transition year 2027, and when it starts to move into the sign of Taurus. The Chiron transit through Aries has been the revealing of the wounds and the vulnerabilities originating from these Aries qualities or expressions: wars, conquering, and the martial qualities of the masculine and the patriarchy, and how Aries has also been, violated by utilizing those qualities in a way that is just about, being soldiering on and perpetrating the basic hero myth, and only the hero myth as if it's something to strive for in our lives, and only that. The hero myth is much broader than the stories of the superheroes and the warriors out there. And it's the after effects of that. It's the wounds that are created from that, the being able to grieve the dead, and grieving the destruction that has taken place, not just from the soldiers, but from the families, from the communities, from all those people that were especially directly affected on the front lines and beyond that. This is a chance to go beyond manifest destiny, to go beyond this sense of the superiority, or we have to conquer in order to be the best. It's going beyond that experience, and I think that over these next years that we have an opportunity to really heal that, to face these truths, and to work together in community, and not to erase Aries, but to repurpose Aries in a way where mission and purpose becomes connected to the revitalization of our Earth and our own, helping those that can't help themselves, and being the guardian of the cosmos, of Mother Earth herself. So this is, again, Chiron's going to go through several stages here, and I'll be certainly keeping on with these videos, and when Chiron comes up in some fashion, I'll be sharing about it. Okay, so here's this next stage of the Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. This is this 4-degree orb, being the November 8th through the 21st, 2020. It was a really super concentration of this right here. And during that time, Venus and Mars and Eris were all in some fashion playing a role during that time. And we're seeing this, of course, just after the election, and it was in that zone. And then we saw the radical and powerful surge in COVID-19 throughout the world, especially here in the United States, but also in Europe and some other places as well. So, and you find this interesting common thread here, and I'm going to bring this up here, and here's where we start detailing this. So this separation of especially Jupiter and Saturn moving away from Pluto, I believe this is going to be that the lessons of Pluto, the lessons of this underworld, this process of surrendering, this process of being out of control and having to face our fears, having to face our fears, powerful educational initiation. And so now that Saturn and Jupiter are going to be slowly leaving that area, it's already starting as of November 30th. It's starting to go beyond 5 degrees, and then all the way until December 13th within 6 degrees. it'll be the orb of those 3 planets will be within 7 degrees, December 13th to the 23rd. And then after the 28th, Saturn moves beyond 7 degrees and Jupiter moves beyond 8 degrees of Pluto. So obviously the 21st of December is that Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, and they'll be about 6 degrees, roughly 6 degrees from Pluto. And so they're, again, widening the orb. So December, we're not completely out of it, but we can see some signs of some potential improvements. But just these are just some clues. And then once we get into, I believe, January and beyond, where it really starts to open up the pathways. And during this time, Mars, of course, is in this zone. Mars is in this zone of Aries squaring Pluto, conjuncting Eris, and getting closer and closer to squaring Jupiter and Saturn, which won't happen until January. So the widening of the orb could be beneficial in releasing this pent up expressed energy. I want to stress here that while Venus was in Libra during November, majority of November, that helped kind of keep the peace. I do believe that there could be some incidents during December and maybe even next year after it's released of some people that are groups of people that are not really dealing with their own personal reality, and so they're taking it out on others, and that could lead to some incidents around around here in the United States in particular, but also in other places perhaps too. But the connection to Aquarius is also going to be strong, so there may be some additional uh, thoughts to be more at peace with one another. So again, it isn't fully understood yet, but I do see some potentialities happening where it's going to be of greater benefit ultimately, or quote good, if you will, if one wants to use that word, than not. But again, not to be completely where I think that there could be some pent up energy and there could be some releases of even possible hostilities. But I do believe in the long term that we'll be safe and we'll be able to navigate this future. Again, it's once they show themselves that we can confront that, we can deal with that, we can come together and address it and work with them, and to be able to all come together consciously and have honest dialogue, conversation, one about the future, one about what we want for the long-term future. All right, so, oh, I didn't, yeah, so we're at the kind of the end of this video, but I wanted to comment this connection here with what took place between February and April of this year in 2020 and the COVID-19. I think that this bears for a much longer video, just specifically about Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, and COVID-19 and the pandemic and the connections to the past, astrologically speaking. During the very first lockdown in March, and that is when there was the greatest concentration of Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto coming together with Mars as well. And this is why I feel like there's a definite major connection to the spikes of the surges of this virus and the spread of it, and the Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto connection here in Capricorn. And with Mars is joining them. In fact, at one time, all 4 planets between March 16th and the 22nd, they were within 7 to 8 degrees of each other, all 4 of them in Capricorn, and the Saturn just barely moving into Aquarius at that time too. So that was really, at least here in the West Coast and New York and other places in the US, it was like things were really getting spiking hard. And it bears further watching as I look at the numbers here. And by April 4th, they started to get out of the 6-degree range of each other. And that's when we were kind of in this new reality. And then in late spring, they did get back into kind of a 5 to 6 degree orb, not as close as they ended up being in November, but they did get in that, but they were retrograde at that time. So it was a kind of going backwards, if you will, from an astrological perspective. But more to say on that in a future video, but just to kind of consider how these planets operate with each other and what as a society we're all learning. I do believe that this virus is teaching us about who we are as human beings and how we're all equal in that we're all susceptible. We're all physically, energetically human here, and that no one, quote, is immune to that space, and that we're also immune to the all the indirect and direct effects that the crisis, the other kinds of crisis that the pandemic can create in our world. Obviously, there's there's some people that have a lot of different theories around how this started, where it was created, or if it was created, or what all these after all these effects of it. But I think the bottom line is that we're all in it together, and it's in the here and now, and it's up to us to choose how to navigate this safely and working together and bringing community together in a conscious way, and helping each other out. This is planting the seeds for the long-term future in this consensus third dimensional reality. So how can we move forward in that space? These are the questions that we're asking ourselves, regardless of who's in political office, and just helping each other in our own local areas and our states and so forth here in the United States, so also other places around the world. This is a worldwide phenomenon. So I would encourage everyone to connect with their authentic expression. This is still a bit of a volatile time, but I do see again a greater light opening up through this dark tunnel, but not to ignore the realities of it, not to bury anything. We can't bury anything anymore. This is the time we got to face it up to everything. We can't get back 2019 or 2018 or even 2010. This is a new reality we're facing, but one that we can maybe create with. Imagine the possibilities where the treasures are. That's what Pluto is helping us to get to, our soul's treasures, and that requires facing our fears and being in a space where we can, courageously, boldly going forward and going, okay, yes, let's face that. Let's stop and think and connect and talk. That more to come on that. And I just want to wish everyone here um, a a beautiful December and solstice. There'll be more videos coming after this, and I just wish everyone peace and love, and to treat each other with kindness out there, and to be authentic unto yourselves, and that each of us has the power to choose and to utilize our free will in what we are and who we are as we go forward in our life. Dream well, everyone.